Hi team, you know what it is. We are back with another dose of that high strength spiritual bleach to burn through those persistent and common spiritual blockages. These seeming impediments on our path to awakening, our journey to enlightenment, and our seeking of inner peace. These common barriers that many people find along the way. And you know, there's no real blockage, there's no real barrier. Often these seeming apparent blockages are just small gaps in the understanding, or perhaps just a very thin veil, a shadow of the mind, some minor persistent belief or delusion that pulls the mind into just more and more seeking. But the real reason, the true and deepest reason that there is no blockage on the path, is that there is no path either. If I was walking along a path and encountered a brick wall, it's only a barrier to my journey if I am trying to get to the other side. If upon encountering this wall, I decide, maybe I'll just stop there. There's no longer a barrier there. It's just a very nicely arranged line of bricks. No more seeking, just like that. So there are no blockages, there are no barriers, because there is no path. Just do it now, inner peace, just like that. Just do it. Sudden. Oh, I get it. In many cases, the path becomes the barrier. It does happen, surprisingly often. So if there's no barriers and no blockages, does that render the content of the rest of this video to be completely redundant, null and void? Yes. Today's blockage that we're dealing with is the blockage of what if the present moment sucks? So you may have encountered the teachings of many teachers, gurus, many practices, many methodologies in spirituality and meditation will talk about presence. Presence. And presence refers to the focusing of attention entirely within the now. Just here and now. This has the profoundly powerful effect of stilling the mind. Bringing the mind to a complete halt. As in order to continue to function and exist, the mind requires the concept of time. Without future and without past, the mind is essentially fired. No longer required. Thank you for your services, mind. You have been a good worker. You have been a very powerful employee. But upon the recognition that we can focus our attention entirely into this present moment, the mind comes to rest. And let's just do this now. Let's just begin to practice a little bit of this presence right here. Simply bring your attention and your focus into what already is. So we're not imagining anything. We're not trying to create anything. We're not even trying to find inner peace, really. It's more of a letting go. Just allow yourself to feel a sense of being in the here and now. Just the what is. And we can connect with the senses. Just open your awareness. Anything you can hear, anything you can see, touch, smell, taste. But do not create any opinions. Do not fall into the habit of analysis or interpretation. Be aware of the sensations in the body, but just a gradual sense of allowing. Just this. This is okay. Just this. And you'll notice your mind continues to be perhaps a little noisy, perhaps a little busy. There are still some frantic and chaotic thoughts. But begin to see if it's possible to observe the content of the mind in precisely the same way that you observe everything that your senses receive, and just don't get involved. You can do this. Just don't get involved. Just choose to stay out of it. Just not interested. Simply withdraw your usual habit of placing opinion, interpretation, imagination, and analysis. In exactly the same way that by ignoring the bark of the dogs were not interested in coming to bother me. So by ignoring the bark of the mind will simply cease its attempts to claw at your attention and will soon fall silent and leave you alone. Thoughts of future, gone. Thoughts of past, gone. Even if thoughts of future arise, they are arising within the present. Just this, just now. And if thoughts of the past arise, those too are arising within the present. So everything just happens now. Just this. And upon the learning of this practice, the recognition of this understanding, that there is no time. Time is a construct of the mind, a concept, an imaginary framework that the mind requires in order to understand, categorize, divide its own experience. This can be a useful illusion. We might say a necessary illusion, whatever. Whatever, sure. But it's an illusion nonetheless. Now, in the modern world, there is a huge amount of suffering that is generated by this illusion. Anxiety from an imagined future. Let that sink in for a moment. The anxiety due to an imagined, illusory future, the infinite possibilities of what could happen. Will I be able to cope? What if this happens? What if that happens? Infinite and imagined. It's not right. And I know this because I suffered anxiety for many, many years. Right up until the age of about 29, I suffered anxiety. And at times I didn't even know that I was suffering because I just thought it was normal. And the tragedy is, it is kind of normal in the modern world to suffer anxiety. Most people do. And most people don't even realize it. Going about their lives stressed, tense, agitated, worried constantly. Just because something is normal does not mean it's healthy. Just because something is normal does not mean it's right. So how much anxiety, suffering from the anxiety is generated from this imaginary future? A lot. And the past. Now the past can be a little more sticky, a little more tricky. The future's fairly easy to see as a total fabrication, illusion, and content of the mind. But the past, well, we cannot doubt that we've had previous experiences. They happened, and we do not want to dismiss or invalidate the pain that you felt from previous experiences, that perhaps now, in the light of new understanding and in the light of new awareness, you now revisit past events, and we begin this thing called rumination, replaying past events. And this causes a huge amount of psychological turmoil. So there's two things to acknowledge when it comes to the past. Firstly, we must acknowledge that yes, previous experiences did happen, and they continue to have their residual effect. A residue, an energetic, stored energy pattern within the body-mind, accepted and allowed. But we must also recognize and know this deeply. The past will never happen again. It's been and gone. You cannot return there. You can't go back and change anything. Can't change what happened. What happened, happened. And now recognize that the past only exists in your mind. Your personal past only exists in your mind. Other people's recollection of the past is going to be different to your recollection of the past. It will be filtered through their personal experiences, their own personal temperaments, their own personal narratives and ego. So this past that you carry around with you, although the energetic residues are still within the body, the images, the events, the narrative of the past only happens in your mind. So upon finding the present moment, the pointer is often, so what's the problem now? And there is a very deep, profound, powerful spiritual awakening that inevitably arises from this alone. Understand that pointing and abide with a true emotional and spiritual maturity, a true emotional and spiritual courage to say, I have suffered enough, and now I choose to abide in the serenity of now. So if you have been following the things I talk about, you probably know my story. Think of that. All of the history, all of the suffering that is contained within the story. But if I disengage from that story, bring myself fully into the now, all of those years of things I thought I'd never escape vanish. And here, what's the problem now? The stillness, the serenity, the peace, just from that. So you may have come across the teaching of presence. And if you haven't, now you have. I just went through it. You now know it. There you go. Done. You now know what the practice and principle of presence is all about. Focusing attention entirely in the here and now to still the mind. But at some point, after doing this practice for some time, or maybe in the earlier stages, you will encounter the very fair enough question of, okay, I get this. No future, no past, I can abide within the present. But that question, so what's the problem now, isn't always going to result in peace. Because sometimes the present moment sucks. It sucks. What do we do then? I understand to bring my attention entirely within the present. But what do I do if the present moment contains unpleasant things, painful things, things I wish weren't there? What do I do then? How then does presence alleviate my suffering? It's a very common and very fair enough question, and we have to understand that is the promise of the spiritual path, right? It is the true transcendence of and the liberation from suffering. And stay with that as well. Don't stop until you get that. Don't fall short of the path, because that's what's been promised, okay? And look, big words I know, but it is your birthright. You came here with that level of serenity and peace preloaded. So let's answer that question, because this is a very common spiritual blockage, a very logical, rational, and totally fair enough hindrance to finding our inner peace. The ability to find presence becomes much more consistent in your experience. You're being a diligent, proactive practitioner of your meditative practice and your spiritual seeking. And you can find presence and gain the peace of presence when in environments such as this one. Serene, peaceful, calm, nature. Or perhaps when meditating at home, you find you can access that peace. But when engaged in daily activity, let's say work is very busy, your workload is too high, you can't handle all of that. Maybe the kids are doing your head in. Maybe your partner, your husband or your wife is just being awful. Maybe there's a lot of noise, a lot of busyness, a lot of chaos in your daily life. Maybe you're stuck in traffic. Maybe you're stuck in the queue in Tesco because the old lady trying to figure out the self-service checkout can't figure out to put the stuff in the bagging area. Right? Stressful. And those are the more kind of minor surface level kind of troubles we find day to day? What about the deeper stuff? What then? What if we're in a lot of pain? Or we're dealing with some much heavier psychological turmoil? This isn't just your boss doing your head in it work. This is some of the deeper, the darker stuff, the nastier stuff, the awful awfuls, the creepy crawlies, right? How can I, just presence alone during that time, how is that going to bring me inner peace? It's a tough one. It's worth exploration. It's worth inquiry. And I think spiritual teachers and spiritual teaching assistants, such as myself, can fall into using this presence thing as a bit of a crutch sometimes. Just straight up honesty, you know, trying to be as transparent as possible. It is one of those things that can be, somebody's got a very difficult question. Just remain present and all will be well. And, which is true, by the way, but because if you stay present, all of these questions are kind of answered in the process. But let's throw a bit more detail into the teaching. Let's look behind the veil on this one. Let's read the teacher's notes on this one, because I've got access to the teacher's notes, so let's read them. This is the deeper, darker stuff. So what do we do? How is presence going to result in inner peace when the present moment sucks? So there are three main pointings that I'd like to put across here. And you could see these as three in an escalating order in terms of their efficacy, meaning their power, and perhaps even escalating, if there is such a thing, in spiritual maturity. It's one way of looking at things that doesn't really exist, but we could look at it that way. And if you have the temperament of liking stages, then that's fine. Then let's do this as stages. So you might find the first one is good enough to take away and practice for a while before moving on to the second, so on until you hit the third. Or you might wish to sit and just go through all three in sequential order. So the first one here is an often overlooked aspect of presence, which is a trap that many seekers fall into upon finding the present moment and gaining benefit from it and going in the right direction, but then accidentally taking a slight diversion, and that is this. Many people make the mistake of believing the present moment to be a sort of a split-second thin moment of time that is wedged between two vast amounts of time. So the present moment is like a very thin sliver down the middle, and then we have a huge chunk of future and a huge chunk of past. And people are trying to stay present by trying to kind of wedge themselves into this thin present moment, and through a kind of force of will, strenuously trying to hold on to this second, and finding that second just keeps on like slipping by as they try to hold on to this ever thinning moment. Like it's an attempt to kind of hold on to a moving platform that is continuing to move through time. Just seen a robin, look at that. Sorry, that's the first time I've tried to zoom on this thing. Let's bring it back. Sorry, okay, sorry. So, let's not wedge ourselves in to this infinitely small present moment. The mistake here is that the mind is still active. The mind is so clever. It's devious and subtle and is a master of illusions, continually weaving new illusions. Takes hold of the teaching of presence and continues to weave more illusions out of it. And that is one of them. It goes, oh yeah, pretends to be on your side, right? Think of your mind like Bugs Bunny, and you're Elmer Fudd looking for Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny is always standing right next to Elmer Fudd going, oh yeah, I'm sure you're going to catch that rabbit real soon, buddy. And that's what your mind does when it's like finding inner peace. It goes, oh yeah, we're really on it now. We're hot on the trail of finding that inner peace. We're nearly there. I know we are. Let's try that rabbit hole. So, the mind here says, yes, okay, let's find that present moment thing that we've heard so much about. And it does this by then saying, right, so let's ignore the future and let's ignore the past and focus only on now. I mean, that makes sense, right? Isn't that what I was just talking about? No. Do you see the trick? Do you see the illusion that's being weaved there? It's subtle, but it's very powerful. Because to ignore the future is to concede that something called the future does exist. And to ignore the past is to concede that something called the past does exist. So this is a very clever trick of the mind. Let's just focus on now and ignore future and ignore past. So, to start breaking through this blockage right here of what if the present moment sucks, well, firstly, we're going to make sure that we are actually present. And by recognizing it's slightly different than that. And here is one very powerful way of doing it. I did a whole video on this, but it's recognize there's no present moment either. No future, no past, no present. Because present moment implies the existence of time. There is no time. So abiding now in the presence of being. Shift into a space of being. No future, no past, no present moment. There's no time, just this. Now this deepens into this presence. And this can begin to alleviate that what if the present moment sucks kind of blockage. Because many times we think, well, I am present, but I'm still suffering. If you're still suffering, you're not present. Suffering is a clue that we're not quite there yet. Suffering, just like pain in the body, is a signal that something needs a bit more attention. Suffering in the psychological world is a signal that your understanding is not fully established. So, no future. Don't ignore the future. Recognize it's not there. There's no such thing. Don't ignore the past. Recognize as a place, as a location, as an entity, there is no such thing. Memories continue, whatever, but memories arise in the now. The presence of being. There is something here. Reality is continuing. Experience is continuing. Even if that reality is illusory, your body is illusory, your mind is illusory, sure, okay. Just experience what is and recognize the fallacy of the concept of time. So if the present moment sucks, we may find there are still some subtle background beliefs that haven't yet been flushed out. There hasn't been enough spiritual bleach poured on those beliefs to burn them out of our consciousness. So, maybe the present moment sucks with a residual, well, I'm okay now, but I'm anxious about, work stressful at the moment. But how can work be stressful at the moment if you're driving to work? And you're not at work, you're driving. If we have that stress and tension of that sort of, but what if, I've got a headache today, what if I have a headache tomorrow at work? You see? And this brings us into that, but now, right now, there may be that unpleasant thing going on, but by deepening fully into that present, the imagined future just becomes a kind of, it's almost irrelevant. It's like, well, come what may, thy will be done. So that's the first step, and it's worth spending a little more time there to continue to burn away some of the more surface level residual stuff. Moving into that second stage, and this is where we start to get real deep. Understand that a lot of the times in these teachings, you may hear or you might receive the pointing of observe the present moment, focus attention on the present moment. Yeah, those two, that's fine. Observe, just observe the outside world, observe everything that you can hear through your senses. And the pointing is often observe. Observe what you can feel in your body, observe the content of the mind, focus your attention, which is good. That's the right way to begin this practice. However, understand something very subtle here. Because of the way that we are conditioned through our education, words like observe and pay attention have implied within them the habit of analysis, the habit of interpretation. We're getting deep into the weeds now. We're going to drink that Kool-Aid. Because of the way that we're taught. And look, no judgment, okay? I couldn't design a better education system, so who am I to judge the education? I don't know, they must have a reason for it. They're all really serious about it, so sure, whatever. That's not my business to judge it. I'm just saying this is a byproduct of it. This is what happens. There is an implication in the words observe and attention that isn't actually inherent to observation or attention. And when you get with that, that's really going to bake your noodle. We are taught when we observe something, in part due to the fact that the scientific method is the is the metaphor by which we're taught to approach life. It's like observe, form hypothesis, test, analyze, right? That method is the method that's ingrained in almost every aspect of the social fabric of our culture. Observe and analyze, right? But understand that observation came first. Observation is actually neutral. And this is what children do before being taught to observe and analyze. We get taught to take notes. So deepening presence here, observe, but don't take any notes. Don't store anything. Don't form a memory. Don't gather information. Don't form a theory or a hypothesis. Don't form an interpretation. Don't interpret. Everything received in the present moment is not then data to analyze. We've had enough of that. Enough of it. It's exhausting and it gets us nowhere when it comes to inner peace. We're trying to come to inner peace here. We are not going to come to inner peace by frantically processing more data. It's not going to happen. So that second pointing here that I just want, this is crucial, by the way, crucial. It's not just the observation and the attention. It's understanding the non-judgmental nature of observation and attention. And recognize you don't have to do anything in order to return to the neutral nature of observation and attention. That part about the analysis, the interpretation, the theorizing, the conceptualizing, the questioning, that came later. That got put into you. You didn't arrive with it. So, if you are practicing presence, just check in with those two things that we've now come to understand thus far. The first is make sure you're not trying to hold on to a real present moment that is wedged between a real future and a real past, but you're trying to just ignore everything and focus on a still clock. Doesn't quite work like that, right? Recognize no such thing as time. There's no future, there's no past, it's really not there. Test it for yourself. Is there time? Where's the time? Where is it? I mean, is it there? Is it hiding behind that tree? Somebody must have it somewhere, right? Does that dog have it? Then what on earth is going on here? That guy needs to be careful. He's being chased by an AI hunter-killer drone. That's all right, stop. Anyway, so. And then secondly, once deep in that presence, just check in with yourself. Is there a latent tendency, a habitual residue? This is a habit of the mind to analyze and interpret the present. That's not the space we're trying to get to. We're not trying to create more powerful... We're not trying to create a more accurate opinion of the present moment. What we're trying to do is remove all opinions. We're trying to come to a neutral space, because another word for neutral is peaceful. We're trying to come to neutrality. Neutrality. Peace, serenity. And peace and serenity is not an opinion. Peace and serenity is not mind activity. It is the cessation of mind activity. We are simply trying to let go of the mind. And our peace is disturbed by the constant analysis, interpretation, constant theorizing and concept of the mind. So understand that this capacity to observe, and I don't mean just the sense perceptions now, it's also the sensations within your body. The internal and external world as it appears. If you removed all opinion, don't try to create a good opinion about those things. That's a mistake. Let go of all opinion, all analysis, all images, all stories, all ideas, all theories. No theories now. The present moment is not a theory, you just experience it directly. The presence of being. This is it. It's here. It's already been done. That neutral observation, without analysis, you already know it. You arrived with it. You came here with it. Just remove the habit that you were taught. So how does that help us with, what if the present moment sucks? Well, sucks is an opinion. What if you removed all opinion and interpretation from the situation? How can it still suck? That removes 99% of the suckiness. I like the spiritual word for that. Suffering. That's another good word for suckiness. Dukkha. Now I'm not saying that all of it is created by the mind, because, okay, particularly if you're healing a deep shame wound, a lot of these words and pointings can be received as a kind of attack, an insult. I'm not saying, you idiot, you shouldn't be making opinions on things, you're an idiot, you haven't got this yet. Because, whoa, I still fall into these traps, and maybe not all of the spiritual teachers, but they will have gone through a process where these traps continued for everyone. You know, it's no fault of anyone. It's not your fault. This is just the way that things have been. Nobody's at fault. That's another theory, right? Who's to blame for all this? That's the mind. Who's to blame for all of this? Curse you, education system! No, it's not about that. It's not an attack. It's just, okay. Everything's just a releasing. Okay. We get it now. We get it now. We get it. It's free now. Free, free, free. So to remove 99% of the suckiness of the present moment, just recognize how much of that suckiness is actually being created by the opinion that we place upon it. Now I'm going to give you a solid example here of, well, there's two examples that happened to me. These are spiritual experiences that I had. And the first one, this is one of the first instances I noticed something profoundly powerful had shifted. As I mentioned earlier, I used to suffer terribly with anxiety, and I'd be at work with like clenched teeth, sweating, heart beating at times because of the anxiety I was in. Sounds ridiculous now, but that's the state I was in, and that's how a state a lot of people find themselves in. It's hell on earth, it really is. It's horrible. But there was one time, I got given my nightmare job. I was working at a gym at the time, and I got given, I didn't mind being in the gym, I didn't mind doing all the inductions and gym because I knew my stuff there. I was in fairly comfortable surroundings. But my nightmare job was being stuck on reception, because I didn't know the processes, I didn't know what to do if people called up with queries I didn't know the answer to, I didn't know how to do anything. And they said, Corin, can you jump on reception for a minute? Like, the receptionist is on break and we don't have anyone else to cover. Can you just jump on reception for 20 minutes? Like it's no big deal. Now I borderline had a panic attack. I'm sure you can, some people out there can relate to this, because they just say it so casually. Just jump on reception, you don't mind, do you, Corin? Cheers, mate. Cheers, Corin. Sound. Cheers, lad. See you in 20. I got stuck on reception, and so I'm trying to figure out how to do the job whilst doing the job. My anxiety levels spiking, and then all of a sudden, that presence thing that I'd been learning in meditation kicked in. So this is how I know that there is true power in these teachings. It kicked in right when I needed it. It did not fail me. It did not let me down. Unseen forces shall come to your aid. I was starting to sweat and panic, and then all of a sudden, I was there, fully immersed in the presence of being, totally at peace. Now, the queue for a huge leisure centre, it was out the door of people like trying to like, come on, we need to like get in the gym and go to our classes and all of this. But I realised that my tension, my anxiety was being created by my interpretation of the situation, and a profound clarity shone through that said, I can only deal with one thing at a time. And this didn't happen up in my mind, it happened throughout my entire being. I can only deal with the customer in front of me, and if there's a customer in front of me, I can't answer the phone. I was just like, and the peace was just phenomenal. I was in a profound meditative state, sat on reception in the midst of my own personal nightmare, and I realised I was creating that nightmare in my own mind. It disappeared, fully in the presence of being. It was no longer a problem. I mean it. Anxiety vanished. The second time that I had quite a profound understanding and insight, I was sat in traffic and I was getting fuming. That's an English term for angry. I was fuming, mate. Threaders, that's another one. You might, for my American audience, I was absolutely threaders. I was turbo threaders, meaning I was rather angry, rather frustrated by the situation. Absolutely turbo threaders. And because I felt like I was in a rush, I needed to get home. I'd had a long day and I needed to get home in a hurry to relax, right? Does that sound familiar? In a rush to relax? Doesn't really work, does it? But I was in a rush to go home and relax, and I was stuck in traffic. And again, that same just wave of peace washed over me. Because I realised that that being stuck in traffic is an idea. It's a concept. And I don't know how this arrived, but it's true. I realised I am not stuck in traffic. I am traffic. This is just a line of cars. But the interpretation of the mind, the story that we place on it, then puts us in the position of I am stuck in traffic. In exactly the same way as the analogy I gave earlier, if there's a brick wall on the path, it's only an obstacle if you're trying to get to the other side. If you had no interest in getting to the other side of the wall, it's just a wall. It's no longer an obstacle. It's a shift in definition, but this has a profound effect. It comes down to your intention and the narrative that you're placing upon the sequence of events. So I recognized, hang on, I'm not stuck in traffic, I am the traffic. Isn't it curious? Every single person in that queue is stuck in traffic. So where is the traffic? Would the real traffic please stand up? It's the same as when people talk about all these problems with society. But you are society. Are you not? You're not suffering from society. You are society. So this realization came in, and I notice, I don't know if you've ever noticed this one, when you're all tight and wound up and then the spiritual bit happens and you go, you just completely drop and all of a sudden I could just enjoy. The temperature in the car was nice, the light that was shining in, the music that I was listening to. It was an opportunity to stop. So what was previously stressful, and I could have gone into, the present moment sucks right now, I'm stuck in traffic, I've got to go home, I'm hungry, my back's sore, I go, why haven't they sorted these roadworks out? Why can't people drive properly? Why are people... And I could stay in that horrible mind stream. But because of the practice, because of the meditation, because of the spiritual teachings, I could shift that into, this is a profoundly powerful opportunity to truly find inner peace. Particularly because there's nothing you can do. That's profoundly relaxing. I can't change the roadworks. I can't change the number of cars. It's not like I can get out and go do something else. There was nothing I could do. And from one perspective, the concept of there's nothing I can do is terrifying and causes suffering. But on the other side, the concept of there's nothing I can do is profoundly serene. Because your responsibility has vanished. Nothing to be done. Because nothing can be done. So that's how that second pointing works right there. Drop the analysis, drop the opinion, return to neutrality, recognize that analysis, interpretation, and opinion are not inherent to observation. So, when you're doing your meditations or you're trying to stay present, and maybe you're listening to a teacher who's giving you the pointings of just observe. I'm doing my spiritual teaching assistant thing here. When the teacher's saying just observe, this is what he means or she means. Observe from a neutral place and watch as the majority of the suckiness about the present moment evaporates. And you will be stunned at the level that actually works. Because you might think, well, that's good enough for sitting on reception or being stuck in traffic, minor surface level sufferings. What about when I'm in hospital with a terminal illness? How's it going to help me then? Or one of my loved ones is suffering a terminal illness, right? You would think that surely it's not going to kick in then. Well, you might be surprised. In the depth of my physical agony and psychological turmoil of grief, rage, and confusion, I found some of the most supernaturally serene moments. And that's not going to make sense to somebody who has not been on this path for a little while. But there are no earthly words to describe what I mean there. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through its black waters to the place we cannot breathe, will never know the source from which we drink, the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small round coins thrown by those who wished for something else. The Well of Grief by David Whyte. And the third pointing is the most profound of all, which I believe, words are very difficult, team, you gotta bear with me, alright? Which I intuit, is a sort of almost a graduation from presence, if such a thing exists. It's post the initial grounding, understanding, and practice of the presence of being, just abiding in the presence of being. At some point, to truly transcend, if you're sincere about this awakening thing, this what if the present moment sucks does need to be fully addressed. at some point. It may take some time to get there because you might say, well, even if the present moment sucks, I know I'm making progress, so it's all good. But eventually you go, no, I need out. I need the permanent peace. I need the permanent serenity. I get the presence thing. I do it all the time, but I'm not quite. How do I make that final step? Well, here it is. You have to shift the perspective of your awareness to no longer be constrained, claustrophobically constricted within the body and mind, and recognize that the awareness of presence is not generated by the body and mind, but the body and mind is just another appearance within the presence of awareness. Now, you are the presence of awareness. You are not the body-mind. That's the shift that will be the final. If you imagine a rocket firing up through the atmosphere, it has to fight through so much atmosphere and burn up all that jet fuel. At a certain point, it crosses over in the atmosphere and is taken by the zero gravity. No more fuel needed, no more stages of rocket burning, no more parts of the rocket falling away. At a certain point, you escape the atmosphere and you are up into zero gravity, no further effort required. Doesn't that sound nice? No more stages, no more effort. This is how we do it. Shifting the perspective to understand where you are observing from. I've run through the neutral, non-judgmental aspect of observation and awareness itself. Now come to understanding the position of where this awareness actually is. You are not a body-mind that is struggling to focus on the presence. Awareness is presence. The infinite, universal consciousness. The presence of conscious awareness. That presence of conscious awareness is not subject to the mind-constructed fabrication of time. It's got no care for it at all. Could not be less interested. All the presence of awareness ever does is be aware. Now you might think, so how does this change the suckiness of the present moment when it really sucks? Well, who does the present moment suck for? Recognizing you are not the individual body-mind you're aware of. So you may be aware that there are elements to the experience within this presence of being that the individual body-mind, if it had a choice, would rather not be there. But you are now observing from a different perspective. You have recognized that you are sat in the audience watching the characters on the play. And you've been so invested, so involved, that you have come to believe that you are one of the characters. I mean, it's a wonderful play. Some might even say it's a divine play. And whether it's a tragedy or a comedy, well, that's down to interpretation. So, from your position in the audience observing the play, you might still be fairly connected to one of the characters, I mean, I know I'm very connected to this character. I'm heavily invested. I really want to know how this story goes. I want to know how it ends. I just know that I'm observing. I am the audience. The eternal audience. But understanding that means you might recognize that the character is going through some kind of conflict and struggle in the play. But you're the audience. And you have the option at any moment to just return to that knowledge. Return to the depth of that understanding, the implications of that understanding. Because if you can withdraw your attention from the play and reside just as the audience, the play vanishes. Why does the play vanish? Wouldn't it carry on the stage? No, there might still be activity and movement that's happening, but there's no story. Because if there's no audience, if the audience has withdrawn attention within itself, the play ceases. Maybe some energy continues on the stage, but it's no longer a play. It's no longer a narrative. Because one thing that the narrative requires is the reader, the observer, the audience that is receiving the narrative. But if we can reside entirely as a neutral, fully neutral, perfectly at rest, serene audience member who is becoming less and less interested in the play, you recognize that the movement on stage is just that. And maybe you go from being quite invested in one of those characters. I mean, we could say there are stages to this. You've gone from being so invested in the play that you believe you are one of the characters, then recognizing, no, I am in the audience watching the play, and I'm heavily invested in one of the characters. Then you realize, I'm getting kind of tired of this play. I'm not really enjoying it. And you start to shift in your seat and go, oh, hang on, right, I can just stop paying attention to this play entirely, and then recognizing by withdrawing your attention from the play, there's no longer a play, there's no longer a story happening, and you can simply rest. That resting is the serenity, the peace, the bliss of being. Now, that's going to take some courage. It's going to take some practice, and it's going to take some maturity. To be able to take your true position in awareness that is observing from such an elevated position that you observe the sensations of the body, the activity then of the body. You observe all of this. But from the correct position, you recognize the awareness never suffers. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. So that's my last tip. The last pointing. So we have gone from recognizing the belief in a time structure sometimes still persists, even if we believe we're staying present. And sometimes the practice of trying to hold on to presence actually reinforces the time concept because it feels very difficult. And we're trying to ignore future and past. So changing that perspective to recognize, no, we're not ignoring time. We are recognizing time is a concept and does not actually exist in reality. We then shift into recognizing the observation and awareness of the present moment should not also have observe and analyze. Remove the habit of analysis and opinion. That's massive, massive. So those two in themselves might be a good starting point. And then thirdly, Recognize the perspective from which you are looking from. St. Francis of Assisi said, what you are searching for is where you are searching from. That's what he meant. And because you will have been, sorry to mix my metaphors, but because you've been that rocket ship that's now done its final stage up and out and being sucked up into the zero gravity, just stay in that zero gravity. From some of that, if some of that has gone in, remaining as the impartial, unattached audience, remain as that, and you're in zero gravity, and you will have no further problems. That's everything I have for you today, team. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate every single one of you. I was not expecting the growth that this channel has received. I just wanted to acknowledge and show some reverence and respect for and gratitude. I acknowledge the significance of this unexpected growth of this channel. I can't tell you how much it means, and I see it now as I don't feel the urge to celebrate. I feel the urge to do some work. I got my work cut out for me now, because if some of these words resonate, I got work to do. See if I can help. And stay with me, and I will help. So I'm not even going to mention the like and subscribe thing. Just not going to mention it. But if you are feeling generous and want to help support me and my work, there's a join button somewhere. You can join the channel memberships, small monthly fee, and you will gain access to my exclusive guided meditations and talks, and help me to upgrade my equipment, and help me to pay my internet bill. That's everything I have for you today, team. Thank you. Take care. Be well. And stay present from the perspective of the infinite universal conscious awareness of the presence of being.